Hey guys, and welcome back to another video. Today we're going to talk about my favorite books of 2020. Of course, these are my favorite books, so it is totally fine if you disagree with me, if you have other books that you preferred, if you have books on this list that you have read and you dislike, that's perfectly fine. These are just my opinions. Honestly, I just wanted to say that before we get into the video. So if I counted correctly, I have picked out my top 15 favorite books of 2020. And to be honest, a couple of books can change depending on my mood or whatever, so it's not like strictly this book is better than the other, but let's just get into the video now. So on number 15, we have a book that I don't own. It is an audiobook that I listened to, and that was The Poet X by Elizabeth Acevedo. And this was the first book that I read of hers, and this is a poetry, not a poetry collection, but it is written in verse. I was very skeptical going into this because I've never read a book like really written in verse, but I decided to go with the audiobook, which I would definitely recommend with any of Elizabeth Acevedo's books, to be honest. She narrates them herself. She's just the perfect narrator for these stories, and I picked The Poet X as my favorite one because the story was just the best one in my opinion. So this is about a girl, Xiomara, I think is her name. She's an artist and she writes poems herself. She is Puerto Rican and she basically describes her emotions through these poems, and they're just so beautiful. The audiobook is like, I think 3 hours, I might be wrong, but it's really short. So you should definitely pick it up if you're willing to try it out. I definitely would recommend it. I think it actually made me tear up at some points. I definitely have to re-listen to it because I think I listened to it in like February. But yeah, this is my number 15. On number 14, we have A Man Called Ove by Frederick Beckman. And this is about a grumpy old man. He is very pessimistic, but also kind of funny at the same time. And the story is very sad, but also very hopeful. So if you're looking for that kind of story, definitely pick this one up. It's super beautiful. I cried so much listening to this audiobook. I really don't want to say too much about this book because I think it is best going into this with no expectations. I didn't know anything going into this either, so yeah, I would definitely recommend this one. Next up, we have Catching Fire by Suzanne Collins. This is the second book in the Hunger Games trilogy, and I reread the first book, and I read Catching Fire and Mockingjay in preparation for the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. That was very disappointing, but I was very surprised with Catching Fire. Obviously, I've seen the movie, and I still think the movie's a little bit better just because this book series is just made to be a movie. I would say I still prefer The Hunger Games because it's just so well crafted, well thought out. But this one as well. So obviously everyone knows what this is about. I don't have to talk about it too much. But yeah, I gave this one 5 out of 5 stars. Obviously, I was a little bit disappointed with Mockingjay, but anyway, that's not the point of this video. I totally forgot to talk about my number 12 on this list, and that's because I don't have the actual physical copy. I read the arc for the Tea Dragon Tapestry, so that's like the third book in this graphic novel series, and here I'm showing the second volume. As you can see, it's super beautiful, and this third volume is actually my favorite one just because it deals with kind of a little bit darker topics, I would say. It's still very whimsical and beautiful, but definitely my favorite volume. Number 12, we have not a book, but a manga, and that is Orange Volume 1 by Ichigo Takano. And when I read this at the beginning of the year, I thought this was going to be one of my all-time favorites, one like the best book I am going to read in 2020, I definitely had to rethink it because there are a lot of problems with the series, especially the second volume, like how everything is resolved. It's very problematic. But if you didn't know, this book is about a group of friends and a new boy who comes into their class, and then the main character gets letters from her future self telling her that this boy is going to kill himself in the future, and she's basically giving her past self instructions on how to prevent that from happening. So it's definitely a very difficult topic, and I really don't want to recommend this book to anyone who deals with depression or suicidal thoughts, but it definitely also has a lot of good sides to it. So it is not at the top of my list, but definitely a read that I will remember forever, probably. Next up, we have The Diviners by Libba Bray. This was an experience, so I once again listened to the audiobook for this. This is set in the 1920s in New York, and we are following Evie O'Neill, and she is like moving to New York, and then she's meeting all these new characters. Her uncle, I think, works in this museum. Her uncle is a professor for the occult, I believe. So it is definitely a paranormal fantasy, urban fantasy, I guess. And the audiobook was so good. It was so atmospheric. And when I listened to this, like, in the dark, I really got scared a couple of times. And I love when books actually affect me and I show some kind of emotion while reading it. It just shows that I actually care. But yeah, this was really, really surprising, and I can't wait to pick up Layer of Dreams. Next up, we have a kind of a different book on this list, and it is Becoming by Michelle Obama, so a nonfiction book. This is obviously her autobiography, and I strongly recommend listening to the audiobook. It is very long, but her voice is so soothing, and normally I can listen to audiobooks for like maybe 2 hours, I guess, not longer most of the time. But with this one, I listened to it like while I was working, and I could listen to it like the whole day, and I didn't get bored or exhausted at all. So I really, really recommend this audiobook. This was so interesting. It has so many good quotes. I only have 3 tabs, but I definitely want to go back and add these quotes. So I really, really love this. I'm very excited for Obama's biography as well. I think I actually already got the audiobook for it, but that's like 30 hours, so we'll see when that's going to happen. Next up, we have a German book by a German author. It is Quality Land by Marc-Uwe Kling. This has also been translated, but I've heard that the translation is not so good, and it's very like a specific kind of humor that I feel like would be difficult to translate. I'm not sure, but the original version is so good, so funny in my opinion. So this is set in the near future. It's basically like a satire, kind of dystopian, I would say. For example, we have self-driving cars, but they also have like personalities, and there's the system where every single person has like a different level based on their job, their income, and we are following a guy called Peter Arbeitsloser, which is like Peter Jobless. Basically, the last names have been changed from these medieval job descriptions to the job descriptions of their father. So because Peter's dad was jobless, his name is Peter Jobless. So it is super funny, but also kind of scary because most of it is actually not so far-fetched actually. But yeah, I really, really enjoyed this, and yeah, obviously 5 out of 5 stars. Next up, we have a book that I did not expect at all to be on this list. I just wanted to read it because I wanted to get it off my TBR, but I was so surprised at how good it actually was. And that was Percy Jackson's Greek Gods. Like, I was so surprised at how good this actually was. Like, I love the Percy Jackson series, but I really didn't expect anything going into this, as I said. Percy basically explains all of these legends and myths from Greek mythology, like how it all started, the main Greek gods. He explains them, their traits, like stories, and in such an entertaining way. I just loved it so much. Really didn't expect this at all, but it's one of my new favorites. And once again, I forgot to talk about my number 6, which was Muse of Nightmares by Laini Taylor. The finale to the duology. I love this. If you love beautiful prose, whimsical stories, please pick this up. I can't talk about it too much because it will spoil everything, but it's so good. Now going into my top 5 books of 2020. I feel like I've talked about this book a lot on my channel, so some of you might expect this, but it is God's Grave by J. Kristoff, the second book to the Nevernight trilogy. This was so good. Like, I get how the middle parts can be very exhausting with kind of the fighting and the gladiators, but once you get to the end, like the last 200 pages, I could not stop reading. I haven't had this feeling like in forever, so whenever I get that feeling where I can't put a book down, where I have like emotional reactions to what is happening, that is a very good sign. And this is what this book had. It had so many plot twists at the end. I did not see them at all. Looking back, I could have probably seen some of them, but I didn't because like I'm not that smart. But yeah, I really enjoyed this and I tapped it a lot. I think this was actually, like, Nevernight was actually the first book that I really annotated. But yeah, I'm so excited for Dark Dawn. I can't believe I haven't picked it up yet, but 2021 is the year. For number 4, I have 3 books. Well, they're like basically the same book, but just different volumes. It's actually graphic novels. So it is the Heartstopper graphic novel series. I just couldn't choose like which one of them I like the most, but they are just like the most heartwarming, cute, wholesome reads like ever. I know these get a lot of hype, but they so deserve it, in my opinion. I just can't wait for the next volume to come out. I think it comes out in May of 2021, so I'm so excited for that. So yeah, obviously these had to be on this list. Just read these, please. They're so quick, so easy to get through. Now on number 3, I have a book that I originally put at number 1 earlier this year, but thinking back, I think that the other books are a little bit better, but this one is still great. It is The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo by Taylor Jenkins Reid. Just look at all these tabs. Like, do I have to say anything? I feel like everyone and their mom has read this book. I'm definitely the kind of person who prefers Evelyn Hugo over Daisy Jones, and I read Daisy Jones first, so I was a little bit skeptical going into this because they were getting like equal amounts of hype, I believe, but it honestly did not disappoint. And if you haven't picked this up, please do it. Even if you think you might not like it based on the premise, it is so worth it. Please just read it. Now for this next book, I actually have a 24-hour readathon that I'm going to link up here, where I read this book. And once again, this was the kind of book that I just could not put down. And I'm talking about another nonfiction book, and that is Trevor Noah's Born a Crime book. So I read this version, which is adapted for younger readers, and then I also got this edition, which is the usual one, which I really want to reread. So if you didn't know, Trevor Noah is obviously this comedian who was born in South Africa to a South African mother, and his father is from Switzerland, so he's white, and that was forbidden because of apartheid, so he is born a crime. So we get a lot of information about apartheid, but mostly this is about him growing up and basically being torn between these two groups. This is just so good and such a quick read. Please, like, pick this up. It is so worth it. Just love this so much. And finally, on number 1, we have a book that was originally tied with The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, but looking back, I think I prefer this one. And this is a German book called Effilist by Anna Moretti, and this, I can't even explain how much I love this book. To be honest, going into this, like, I read around 30 pages and I was like, I can't do this. I was reading this for the Owls readathon, so I was like, I can't get through this book. This is like so cringy, but it just got better and better and better, and the relationship was just so well written in this one. Oh, I didn't even say what this is about. Basically, this is following a girl who lives in Berlin in 1894. It is so feminist. We actually have that evolution of her from going to this like school for girls to her really rethinking that, and I think in a really realistic way, forming her own opinions and her own thoughts. This was just so good. So if you are able to read in German, I highly recommend this one. So funny and so like feminist and beautiful, and I want to reread this immediately. Yes. So these are my top 15 books of 2020. I really hope you enjoyed this video and that you could, you know, get some good recommendations. And please comment down below what your favorite book of 2020 was, if you've read any of these books that I showed in this video. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed this, and if you did, please don't forget to subscribe and give this video a thumbs up, and I'll see you in my next one. Goodbye, guys.